Hey, what's up, everybody? William Johnson here. I'm messing around with some shakers, and that is what this episode is about. Shaker technique, playing shakers in a contemporary type of setting, meaning not necessarily a traditional music setting. And I take it a break on the cajon grooves for contemporary worship to talk about this, but we'll get back on the cajon and maybe even talk about some bongos and some congas, back on some funky congas as well. So, shakers. If I'm going to play a set, one of the main instruments I'm making sure gets in the bag or goes in the man van, I call it the man van, my minivan, is definitely going to be a shaker. Now, I normally travel at least 3 or 4 shakers, sometimes more, because it just can't have enough shakers and brushes and rattlers and all that other ambient goodness. But I normally have at least one shaker, at the very, very, very least, because I just love adding that, especially to a nice soft ballad or even to a faster song, especially if I am the drummer and I'm playing an acoustic hybrid drum setup. So the cajon, a suitcase for the kick, maybe perhaps a regular smaller kick like an 18-inch kick and a snare, or the cajon and some congas, just a different type of drum setup. But I usually use a shaker often as in place of what the hi-hat is doing, or just to make transitions within the songs, break up the song and have different layers within it. So I'm going to talk a little bit about technique, different types of techniques and some tricks. We call them tricks, but different techniques, the way that I develop different sounds on shakers. And it all depends on the type of shaker it is. So I have some different kinds. I have some in here with me anyways. I have some in the seasoning bottles here, as well as some made by larger companies such as Mino or Toka or LP. So these shakers here, these are Mino Luis Conte signature shakers, and they're my favorite. They're my favorite go-to shakers, especially the red one. There's 3 types. There's the black, the red, and the gray. So you have the Stadium, which is the loudest one. Then you have the Live, I believe it is, and then the Studio. For me, the middle of the road and the best for if I had to pick one of those would be the red one, because I can always stack it with another shaker, or I can stack it with if it's just playing by itself, I can always make it a little bit louder if I need to. But making it softer is sometimes more of the difficult thing. And of course, this is all controlled by the microphone if you're mic'd. But sometimes in certain situations, a very small room, just a few people listening, that may be a little more difficult to control. So some of the terms that I'm going to use, this context is for those that are in a worship set. So Christian contemporary worship set. But even if you're not playing for a religious service or a Christian contemporary service, some of these techniques will still apply, whether it's a restaurant, you're playing in a bar setting, whatever, a jazzy setting within a museum, an art museum or something like that. These techniques can still be relevant and applied to that. So first, back to the shaker here, you notice that it's kind of the way it's shaped here. It's like 2 shakers in one stuck together. Well, I like to hold it flat. And if you hold it flat, and I like to keep everything vertical. So even if I'm holding it down here, I still move my hands so that, you notice there, I'm still keeping it as flat as possible, because the beads or whatever's inside is sitting right on the bottom. And I want to use as much fine motor control to control what's inside. And so what happens is, I'm ending up having a finger in the middle and then a thumb anchoring it on the back, and possibly these 3 fingers, but mainly this second longest finger here to control the pivot between my thumb and that finger there. So I'm using that for all those little accents that you hear. Whether it's straight, or then I want to add those, right? So for me, when I'm playing a shaker like this, it's very important, like a flutist would try to control their tone. If they're trying to do just pure tone and not too much breath, not too much air and not too harsh, and then they just want that pure tone. Well, sometimes that's what I do with the shaker, where I just want the shh of the sound as opposed to the plastic that it's hitting against. I don't mind a balance of all of that. It just depends on the musical context or what type of songs or genre or the song that we're playing. But I like to control the shaker with that in mind. Now, some of the things that I'll do with this type of shaker is, if I'm playing it by itself, is when I get to a part of the song where we are climaxing, we're getting more intense within the song, then I may stack it. Say it's the chorus, say it's the chorus after the bridge, and we tend to be a little more intense in that part of the song. Then we're here, but when it's mic'd up and you're in good communication, chemistry with the sound man, you're working the room, you're listening, you're paying attention to your in-ears, or even if there's no in-ears, your wedges or just your ears, then you have this to go from here to here. Is a whole nother sound. It's a fuller, thicker sound. Or let me just, there we go. 1, 2. Now, if you want to free up the other hand and you're playing congas, you're playing on a tambourine, then you can just, and that takes some technique to go between them, and you're using all of the other instrumentation to ghost out as much as possible any other clinks and other little sounds that you don't want in there. And that does actually take some practice and a lot of being intentional and present in the music. For me, these are not just like, there's two ways of thinking of shakers that I think of shakers. One is as the ambiance like in a restaurant. So the music, the lighting, the design, and you're on a date with your wife or you're eating with some friends, and that just makes the whole experience. And depending on what's happening there, it changes the experience. That's one way to look at shakers. Shakers are like that. The other way of looking at shakers is it's not just the ambiance, but it's part of the meal. It's part of the garnish. And so depending on the sound, you're playing with spices and seasonings here. So you're looking for a certain sound that you feel fits that application. In this bottle right here, I have actual rice, and this is a plastic bottle. If it was glass, the sound would be it would be more of a shimmery sound, a higher pitch, perhaps shimmery sound, if that makes sense. Not metallic, but glass. Think of a higher pitch, scrapier a sound. So the plastic is going to be of a softer sound, and it also it's thick, and it deadens the sounds a little bit, makes it a little lo-fi, so you have a crunchy lo-fi warm sound to it. So that, but you still have the shh. So if you add that with the nice soft sandy type of texture that you hear there, then you have a combination of both of them. Sometimes that crunchy sound is just a bit too much. Sometimes all it takes is just changing it to glass or the container, or taking rice out. Maybe you need less of your substance inside of it. I have a shaker here that I've been using for the last 3-4 years. Probably shouldn't open it because it would smell really bad. But is couscous. It's couscous in a Mrs. Dash's bottle. And this is a very soft, light shaker. So I control dynamics with my hands as I play the shaker. But it helps having an actual different tone, a different dynamic, how loud that shaker is going to be, how soft that shaker is going to be, because now I can control its efficiency. So even though I can do the same amount of pressure and shaking and energy on the shaker as with this one here, it's just going to be softer. So I don't even have to worry about how loud I shake, how hard I shake this. It's still going to stay at a certain volume level. But also texture, tone, timbre, timbre. The sound itself it's going to be a little of a softer palette. So for a ballad, it's great. So I like to play with all of these different ideas. Now, holding the shaker, I'm always careful to let the stuff inside of it be at an even level. So how you hold the shaker, stay present. You'd be surprised how effective you can be just playing the shakers, how you can change the whole emotion of the song to the point where you'll have the music director maybe even look at you and go, ooh, that's nice right there. Keep playing. And it's the shaker. It becomes a core element of the song. Depending on how much you're paying attention to it, you can really sway the song. You can change the direction of the song and the emotion of the song and manipulate it in a good way. You can also manipulate it in a bad way. Sometimes we want no shaker, and it's not necessarily what we say, well, let's not play shaker here. It's not so much that the shaker shouldn't play. It's just a matter of EQing it as the musician with your ears. So for instance, this shaker at this level of energy and muscle that I'm giving the instrument is going to have a certain dynamic and volume range. I can still have that energy, but just play it softer. And really what's happening is my movement has lessened, less movement, but also the amount of pressure and force that I'm giving the instrument has changed. I can still move. It takes more practice to have all this movement, but to play softer. Sometimes what that means is if you just got to move, the rest of your body's moving, you've got that energy, but here is controlled. For instance, here, everything, including my arm, is in it. Yeah, I'm in it. But now, and I'm still, my hand's going, and everything else is going. Yeah, I'm moving around. I still get that energy, but I've lessened the movement here and the dynamic here. Sometimes that's just what needs to happen. You're thinking of yourself like the sound engineer or a mixing engineer within a studio, and you're pulling those faders down. You're panning it out to the right. You're working the sound of the room, which is hard when it's a really big room and you're behind where the live monitors are, the people can hear, so you can't really tell what you sound like out there, so you have to trust the engineer. But at the same time, you may know and you may work with a certain microphone setup that you're comfortable with and familiar with, knowing that if I'm over here, I can still play a little bit louder, but because of the direction of that mic and the way the engineer has it set up, I've pulled back a little bit and control the dynamic, but I'm still able to keep the energy that I want. There's a lot of little things that come into play there, but that all is connected to how intentional you are with the instrument. The more you respect the potential that this instrument can give to the song, the more intentional you're going to be with it, and the more sounds you're going to be able to pull out, the more versatile you'll be even with the shaker. So, for instance, there's a lot of things that can happen within the shaker. I could be playing the shaker, and if I'm intentional in practicing, then I can start adding other more interesting stuff, different accents, and I can now respond to the other musicians. If they went to a 6/8 or a shuffle feel, like a 6/4 or a triplet over a 4/4. So what's happening here is it just becomes this kind of weird, quick little vibe, a motif that the guitarist throws out there. You're able to comp even on the shaker and follow on the shaker. Sometimes it's not what's necessary. Sometimes you need to stay still in what you're doing to lay a bed down for everyone else to lay down and be comfortable to do what they're doing. But sometimes you can comp on the instrument. The more you practice on the instrument, the more versatile and the more liberty you have. For instance, with my right hand, I could be playing this, and this is a one shot from LP, finger shots. It's meant to play in your fingers, but I use them like this. So now I'm playing kind of a loop. And if I remember that, I can use that within that song. I'm composing here on the fly, but I'm able to do other stuff with my right hand while my left hand still holds it down, the ostinato, the steady pattern, the shaker pattern, right? So another thing about shakers real quick, before I finish in this video, and we'll talk more about some other stuff here concerning shakers. is shakers that you can hold with your entire hand, so you can kind of, control the tension with one hand, are awesome. For instance, this is a UFO shaker from Mino. It fits perfectly in the palm of my hand. Now, depending on how tall you are, how large your hands are, it's going to change, right? Or small your hands are, whatever the case is. But the idea is that I can hold it with one hand and I can change the sound with the pressure and where the accents are by letting go of a certain amount of real estate on the shaker, for instance. Now, I talked about this in a little Instagram video that I posted a couple days ago, where I said often I'll be shaking this type of shaker and then I point a couple fingers towards the microphone. Now, what I'm doing is I'm not giving the peace sign saying, yo, peace to the microphone, but I've actually experimented and found for me with this shaker, letting go of that much of the shaker and releasing that much of its surface to the microphone gives a great accent to the holding it. And I can still control it very well with the rest of these fingers. I can do it with 3 and control it with the thumb, but I'm at my comfort zone when I have these 3 digits holding the shaker. All right? So, what does that sound like? As opposed to and then here's with the fingers again. Now, another thing you can do, squeeze it tighter. As you're shaking, control the tension, and you can modulate the sound. Pretty cool, huh? There's a lot of cool things that you can do with the shaker. Some of this is going to be very appealing to those of you that work in the studio, but even out on the stage when you're thinking about what sounds you're going to add, I love atmospheric stuff, ambient stuff, and in the sense of, or the context of worship with pads, string pads with the keyboardist, I think some of these things, they just go hand in hand with it. So the more intentional you are, the more sounds you can pull out with, because you are paying attention with every little stroke, the instrument that you're playing. And I think that's only going to enhance the song. Now, before I end this video, I wanted to remind you, if you have not done so yet, if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. That would make my day. That would be a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful sunny day. I'm here by my window in my studio here, and I'm looking outside and the sun is shining, and I'm thinking how wonderful it would be for you to subscribe to this channel. Okay, enough corniness for that. I'm going to go ahead and let you go and get to the next video. But anyways, before I do that, quick bonus, DIY, do-it-yourself bonus that I have recently done is I love broomsticks. I have different types of broomsticks for brushes. But I was in an Ace Hardware store. For those of us that are in the United States here, we have our Ace Hardware store. And I saw these brooms that look like this. You've probably seen them on a short handle. And I thought, They were $5 for 2, and I thought, wow, or $6. I was like, man, that's great. And I love the way they look, the feel of them. And I thought, I'll just cut off these little blue lines that keep it tight. And this is how it looks when you buy it. This is how it looks when you take those off. The reason that's important is when they're like this tight, you get more of a stiffer sound. But when they're loose, like this, you get that sound. And you can almost play that like a shaker. So if you have a shaker, because you have to think about the function of the instrument, not just what it looks like and how you buy it and the package. What is it doing? What is the sound? What is the, and not just the sound, but the role that it plays because of the sound in the song. That can play a steady pat that fills the sound in the background, right? Like a hi-hat, but if you have 2 of them, right? Then you can play on a surface just like the shaker. as the drummer if you're playing with the drummer, right? So anyways, that's a cool little, little bonus. Do it yourself. You can head to the hardware store, get yourself some of these broomsticks. There's some great companies that sell them, custom made too. I don't want to knock on them. Maybe I'll do some reviews of some that I have found that I love. But if you just don't have that in the budget and you're at a hardware store, I believe in being creative anyways and repurposing instruments and such and upcycling things. So go to your hardware store, check out these brushes, cut those off. That's great. So hopefully I've said some things in this video that helped you out. Please don't forget to subscribe. I'll do another video on shakers, doing some other techniques and things like playing in multiple directions, using shaker for the accents or backbeats, right? Getting sharper sounds, sharper tones out of them, as well as this guy, which is really cool. He's a little drum shaker. Check this out. There's BBs in there, and I'm throwing the BBs towards one of the heads, and I can get a little backbeat. And if I control it with my thumb, I can get different sounds while still having that steady pattern. There's a lot of little neat things you can do. Oh, one more thing that's pretty cool too. You got the spark shaker here from Meinl. Very bright, metallic, but the minute that I hold it, it just becomes a crunchy shaker. So don't underestimate these little beauties. There's a lot of different sounds that you can make with them. I'll do another video talking about shakers, and we'll get into some rattlers and some atmospheric percussion as well, some creative things that you can do. This has been a long video. Thanks for hanging in there with me, and I'll see you soon.